The conservation meeting for December 6th, 2022, 6:30 is now open. I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes from last meeting.
15, I'll
No.
make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, the first one up is, it's a new public hearing, so I'll read that in. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 MGL, as amended, the West Bridgewater Wetlands Protection Bylaw and Rules and Regulations, and the West Bridgewater Comprehensive Stormwater Management Regulations, the Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing on December 6th, 2022 at 6:30 PM in the McDonald Brown Conference Room. And we'll open it up.
Excellent. Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, for the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering Solutions, with an office in 1 Manley Street in West Bridgewater. With me tonight is Dylan Cole from my office, who worked on the notice of intent with me. And we may have our site contractor joining us, Bill Jope, on Zoom. He may come in. Before I set up, I know we got a crowd tonight, and I think this crowd is all here for us. Is there a better place I should put this easel so everybody can see it, or just?
I guess you could turn it.
Face it
Alright.
that way, come on.
We can look at this too.
Is it gonna
We
be
have
both
it
places?
here.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
have
have
it.
it here.
I have it here.
Okay, great. Let me turn it a little bit so everybody can see better. Grab it, grab it, Dylan. All right, so if I may, just a little bit of history kind of to how we got to this point, because we've been at this for a little while now. This is one component park. It's the ICS facility. What they do there is they are a shipping and receiving hubs for plants. They take in plants, they store them, they cart them, they get them right back out. The existing building, at some point, there's an area on the existing building that was torn down. It's a foundation only. So we had filed with the planning board for site plan review to reconstruct on top of that existing foundation. During that process, John Delano, who obviously you all know, your prior agent,
Yeah.
former agent,
Yeah.
came up with two things during his review. One, he felt that the proposal qualified for your stormwater permit,
Yep.
general stormwater permit, so he asked us to come forward with that. The other thing that he found, and it was unknown to us, but he's right, over time, this area that you see in the back was cleared, gravelled, and then paved. It's a cart storage area, but there's a portion of that area that is in the buffer zone, and it was all done without the benefit of a permit. So John said, you know, you guys gotta obviously file an after-the-fact notice of intent, so that brings us here tonight. So we're here for the after-the-fact notice of intent for that. We're here for a general stormwater permit for the proposed development, and that ties into the mitigation that we're proposing for the disturbance in the buffer zone. We are proposing, and I'll get into some detail on it, a stormwater management system for that area as well. So let me start with the work in the buffer zone first. Once we got word from John Delano that we had a potential violation, we did engage Brad Holmes in Environmental Consulting and Restoration, who I think you all know. Fantastic wetland scientist, went out there, redelineated the wetland resource area for us. And we sent our survey crew out to locate the area in the back. And what we find is that, yes, it is in fact paved into the buffer zone. I don't believe it was a malicious thing. I think it was done out of ignorance of the regulation. But certainly when it came to light with the owner said, do what you gotta do to make it work. In the existing, I should mention too, a portion of that paved area is in your 50-foot buffer zone. So you'll see in the package that we submitted, we like to leave that area there rather than pulling it out and creating additional disturbance in the 50-foot buffer zone. So we have submitted a waiver request to allow that to remain at the same time.
How big is it?
In that area, it's probably about 1,000 square feet roughly.
Is that portion being used?
That portion is being used, it's only used for cart storage.
Is that, could that not be used? Or is that something that cause a hassle?
Well, if this board feels very strongly that it needs to come out, I think we know what we need to do. In the existing condition and in the historic condition, everything from this back portion of the site flows to the wetland overland, okay? So let me just start with the drainage design for what we've done there as part of the mitigation that we're proposing. And I apologize, I know I'm standing, talking to the commission, standing in front of everybody here, so I'm not able to let anybody see the plan, I apologize. Right now, everything flows in this direction to the buffer zone, to the wetland resource area. What we're proposing to do is along the down gradient edge of the paved area, we're going to install a vertical curb. We're going to catch that water. We're going to collect it in a catch basin there that's going to be equipped with a water quality unit to create, to clean the storm water before it goes back into the ground. And then we're going to push it into an underground infiltration chamber that will then overflow in a controlled fashion back to the wetland. Okay, so what that does, if you take a look at the drainage report that we submitted, we have three conditions that we're trying to compare. We have the pre-disturbance condition altogether. Then we have the existing condition that has a certain flow that goes to the wetland. And then we have the proposed condition. So what we've tried to do is take the proposed condition and turn the stormwater characteristics back into the pre-disturbance condition as much as we possibly can. And I think we've accomplished that with the design, obviously within reason. So obviously, as you know, when we disturb and then gravel and then pave an area, we gradually, incrementally increase the flow going to the wetland. We increase the potential for sediments. We increase the potential for oils and things like that. So that's why we've provided a design, excuse me, that collects, treats, recharges, and then controls the discharge of the water. So we're hitting all the marks in the stormwater management standards in that regard. The other component, and this is completely removed from the wetland at this point, is the area that is proposed for redevelopment. So right now it's a foundation. Mr. Delano's concern was that once we put a roof on it, the water is going to flow off of it in a kind of a more advanced fashion, right? It doesn't have the ability to soak into the soils as much, things like that. All of the water from that area now flows out to a catch basin that ties into a drainage system on Howard Street. So what we've done is we proposed a secondary infiltration system that will collect the rooftop runoff from the proposed area, pipe it out the back of the building, push it back, and that water is clean, so it doesn't need recharge, water quality treatment. Push it back into the ground through some infiltration chambers, and then those will overflow back to the catch basin that it goes to now, but it'll be a piped overflow. So it won't be overflowing overland, right? So that should help alleviate any overland flow concerns, things like that. We're gonna catch this thing, put it all back into the ground, and then pipe it into the closed drainage system where it goes. And that closed drainage system crosses Howard Street, goes through the field over there through a swale and goes along its way. And I believe it's owned by the town once it crosses Howard
So
Street.
it's a little brook that
Little
runs
brook.
over there. The
Exactly.
little brook goes.
Yep, that's the one. So that is the long and short of it. You know, obviously some disturbances in the wetland buffer zone. We requested a waiver for the 50 to let that remain. If this board feels strongly that they don't want to support that waiver, then so be it. Two separate stormwater infiltration designs, one to service the area that's draining to the wetland, one to service the area that drains to Howard Street. And that's why we're here. So I'm glad to open it up to any questions you folks may have.
What would it look like if you didn't go into the buffer zone? What would your...
Let me grab my pen. So the red line that you see right here is the 50-foot buffer zone. So I think what you're asking is what would happen if we cut that off here?
Exactly.
Well, that's exactly what we would do. We would cut it off. We would take this catch basin that we have proposed and move it back here. We would extend our vertical curb around this chamfered edge to collect the water. And we'd end up with a very similar system, albeit probably a little smaller because it wouldn't have this additional 1,000 or so square feet to deal with.
How big is that one now? That
How big is the system?
the chamber, yeah.
36 of the 330 Cultec chambers. The 330s, I think, are 2.5 feet tall, so they're big. I should note, too, that we did do test pits out here during John Delano's tenure, and he did witness those test pits for soil conditions.
So how much smaller would it be if it wasn't?
I'd have to run the numbers. If we're going from 36 chambers, we'd probably end up somewhere around 30. I would guesstimate, but I can certainly run those numbers.
So that's not the mitigation you're thinking of.
That is stormwater mitigation. is what we've talked
Not
about.
about for the 50.
For the 50, we haven't proposed anything in the way of additional plantings for the 50, only because that area is very vegetated at this time. Certainly, if we were to lop off that corner, we would have to regrade that, we would
Yeah.
plant that, without a doubt. Or the other thing that we could do is we could come out here and do some interplanting in the buffer zone, maybe try to do a little bit of a buffer zone enhancement in some locations. It is I don't know if Tim's seen it or not, but it's a pretty
This is Howard.
vegetated, pretty healthy vegetated buffer zone right
So
now.
you wouldn't want to change that.
Hmm.
So why change it?
Yeah, we didn't want to propose to go in there and start removing
Oh,
vegetation just to
yeah,
put new
no.
stuff in.
No.
But we can interplant.
Are you required, when we give you a waiver on 50-foot incursion, to replant somewhere else, or can you get other types of mitigation, like a more extensive filtering system for the water?
I believe that's up to the discretion of the board. I know when we fill a wetland, I believe your bylaw requires a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1. Whereas this is buffer zone, Tim, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's some leeway with what that mitigation turns into.
I mean, if you got a pre-treatment type of drainage system?
We do, yes.
Yeah.
We're collecting in a catch basin and we're piping into a storm scepter. You know, does the swirl, takes out the
Yeah.
oils and the grit,
Right,
things like
right,
that.
right. We've got a hard paved surface here.
We do.
What about trucks?
square feet.
So the only thing that I've ever seen back here is trucks do come back to drop off, but they generally back in and they pull back out. It is primarily cart storage, so the trucks will come out, they'll pull the carts up to them, load them up, get them out of there, and the truck pulls back out. I have never seen more than one truck back there at a time.
Even, are there doors on the warehouse?
On the warehouse
Up
itself,
in that section, you can have
Prior-
trailer trucks in there? or-
there are certainly trucks in this section. I was referring to the section that's been newly paved out by the buffer zone.
Yeah.
They haven't that, but
I guess I'm concerned about oil dripping onto that surface. and
Absolutely.
Draining off.
Absolutely. The concrete area that's back here now, that's why we've installed the
Pre-treatment.
pre-treatment system.
yeah.
The rest of this area is paved, and yes, there is truck activity there. There is a closed drainage system in place there, things like that.
The replacement of the building,
Yes,
you're just not gonna be any bigger than that foundation,
it's
right?
the same size as the foundation.
How tall though? Is it gonna be,
It's gonna meet zoning requirements as far as the building height is concerned. If you go out there now, the foundation probably sticks out of the ground 3 feet, roughly. We do have a ramp system up front here, and then what that's proposed to do is it's gonna do a couple of things. ICS is gonna move their office into the addition. The back portion of it is gonna be a warehouse to connect to the existing warehouse, so they can stop bringing some of the stuff that they do inside now, stuff that they do outside now, they wanna bring it inside. And then they do have some storefronts proposed in the front, whether it be retail, office, whatever's allowed in that district.
I got another question.
Yes, ma'am.
This drainage system that goes, the Howard system,
Mhm.
that goes into the fields, the soccer fields?
Yes, if you look here, this catch basin flows across the street to a manhole, right here. This manhole comes across the street and daylights to a little stream that runs alongside the soccer fields.
Aren't we already having a problem with water in that field?
Yes, yeah.
how is the
Across
drainage?
Main Street.
How is the pipe in
Underneath.
that? Is that, have you looked at that as?
We have not cambered it, we've inspected the structures, and we've never found the structures to themselves to be ponded, or any sign of structural defect. We could certainly camber the pipe if we needed to. One thing that I should mention is that the intent of our design, the intent of the infiltration chambers back here is not only to get water back into the ground, but it's to control the discharge. So again, what our drainage system, drainage report shows is that what's going here in the existing condition will not be exceeded in the proposed condition. So we won't make any flooding problem across the street any worse. That's not to say that we can't investigate if there is a flooding problem.
But it
across
would
the
be nice if that, because if that pipe hasn't been touched in years, and you never know what could be.
street. We can take a look.
Take a look. And then the town on the other side might have to clean out that area there and
Yeah.
Right.
keep up with it after.
Yeah,
Well,
I-
it seems like maybe if you put any water there, it's not gonna be good.
Well, it shouldn't be any more than it's gonna, than would normally run there anyways.
Right.
From what the other place the other building was.
But some of the question is, with regards to that field, is how much is actually on the field?
Yeah.
Like caught on the field and not draining through the field versus how much actually comes out of the swale.
That would be the, I think the town's problem to
Yeah,
clean that up.
You're right.
One of the things that we found, and I'm sure there are people here who can talk to this better than I can, there was, when we went through the planning board, there was some complaint about some ponding on Glenmere Street. We did report that to the DPW. They came out and actually cut a swale back to this wetland, and I believe that got better.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Not correct?
I
Okay,
got
well, they
pictures for
will
you.
certainly fill me in. But it may be certainly a similar situation where there's some town maintenance needs to happen on the fields.
Okay, and before I go too far,
Yeah.
I am going to make a public disclosure that I am a member of the First Church. I'm actually the church president, so there could be a potential conflict
Sure.
going forward. I have talked with a couple of the abutters in regards to the Howard Street drainage side.
Yes.
There is concern where that catch basin is that there is a drainage line that goes across to the abutting piece of property to take the water that sheds from the
The Snell property.
Snell property, basically from the entrance to Component Park. If you look at the elevations, it all sheds in towards Mr. Snell's property. And the drainage basin, I guess, on Mr. Snell's property, there is a link into that catch basin.
There is. We
Okay.
did find a pipe. It took us a while to find it because it was submerged, but we did find a pipe that comes in.
Okay.
Yes.
Wanted to make sure that was identified so that we knew that that was part of it.
And we're not proposing to touch that. We're
Okay.
gonna leave that in the condition it's in now and let it drain as it does.
The other question I had was the concrete pad area
In the back.
in the back.
Yes.
Was that always concrete, or when did it become, and what was it before it was?
I have a timeline that goes back in ortho photos, I think back as far as 2013. I believe, and I'm ballparking dates here, but I can certainly get you the information. In 2013, I believe it was vegetated. And somewhere around 2018, I believe it was cleared, gravelled, and recently paved. Paved within the course of the last probably 18 months, I would say.
Wow.
But my concern being, that's why he's designed the stormwater to collect, because now you've created more
Much
impervious
surface.
Certainly
surfaces, so
have,
you've got to
yes.
deal with
Yes.
that stormwater.
And I could be iffy on my timeline,
Yep.
but that's, just looking at the ortho photos, I believe that's where things stand.
There's no doubt folks here that are concerned about the Glenmere Street area, but the flow isn't going that way at all, is it?
No, if you look at the topography that we have shown on C3, the existing topography, we've got shots on Glenmere at elevation 76 and change, and then we've got catch basins down on the site at elevation 75. So Glenmere is actually higher than the site is. It's not, the site is not sheeting water to Glenmere, it's actually coming the other way.
Right, right. Okay.
So I'll open, you guys, I'll open.
The only other question, the pre-existing catch basins in the parking lot,
Mhm.
are they being tied in to this new system?
They are not, we're letting them stand alone. I actually believe a lot of them are leaching catch basins.
So I'll open it to the public here. Any questions?
Mike Bear, 32 Glenmere Street. So the water issue is one of my biggest things with the other selectmen, because I have pictures here, and this is the last one as of August 23rd, where the water is from the fence all the way to the driveway on my property, which is about 35 yards. If you look at this picture, the fence that's there, that Components put in, or whoever owns it, is sitting, the ground is lower than the fence is higher. So that water that's coming is definitely coming under that fence and flooding into Glenmere Street. Now, my property, yes, is elevated, but that doesn't mean that if it keeps coming, it keeps coming. My concern is that where they're doing this whole drainage thing here, that's where the cesspool systems are, septic systems, which is literally on the other side of that fence. And the whole thing with the whole driveway and all that, I live right next door, so, you know, and he's somewhat accurate with the timing, but this was all done hush-hush without anybody ever knowing
Yeah,
anything
that's
about
the
it.
first from us too.
I mean, they're coming here and presenting something that was done long before. This is putting the cart before the horse. And again, at the selectmen's meeting, these were my concerns, because that water, and I also am speaking for Mrs. Utka, who's 90 years old, who's across the street, who's in a butter, and we feel the same way. All that water is going on the property. Now, as far as the town coming out to alleviate that situation, they came out, they brought their trucks, they brought their backhoe, and they dug a big thing and ran into a foundation from a factory that was there many, many years ago when the train ran through. So because of that, they just stopped. And nothing has been done. And periodically, somebody from the town will come down and they'll look and see, and yeah, when it's not raining, guess what? It's clear. When we have a good rainstorm, it continues to back up. And my concern is that with all this water that's on that big pad, I understand that it's here, but water is going to find its own way. It's just like when you have leaks in your house, it's going to find and go. And I believe that either Mrs. Utka's property is going to end up getting flooded out, or my property. And these are my concerns.
Sir, may I see the picture, please?
Yes.
How long have you had this problem with the water building up?
Well, I've lived there for almost 30 years, and for that whole entire time.
Okay, so it's not something that, it's always been like that. I mean, these guys are coming in.
But it hasn't been, can I interrupt?
Yep, go ahead.
Ms. Meyer.
I'm
Yep.
Patty, I'm his wife.
Yep.
It has not been that bad ever.
Well, these guys are coming in now to help prevent any of that new stuff from flowing. That's why they've put in the
Thank you.
chambers to help.
The chambers are new, right?
The chambers are gonna be new, everything's gonna be new. For all that water that's gonna be happening and what they're gonna be doing is not gonna, doesn't affect anything with over there with you guys. So even if the water's building up on that side, that might have something to do with that driveway of components that needs to be looked at somehow, and
Sure.
the property owner or the people who own it, then they're gonna have to come in front of us
I'm
again.
just gonna shake my head.
No, I know, it's hard, and then you can't,
But you haven't lived, you haven't lived it.
Sure.
but,
And it
but,
hasn't been the
I
whole
understand.
30 years that we've been.
but then you
here.
come
It's
up with
been-
these things like this, where the town gets in there, all of a sudden, 30 years, or how long ago they had a foundation. Nobody knew that was there.
Mhm.
It's just, these things happen now, all of a sudden they come up when people start building new houses, start putting in new businesses at places that haven't been there, and I understand you're concerned with the water.
But we never
You're-
had a problem when it was the gym or when it was components, we never flooded. Never
So
flooded.
it's
gotten
Never.
It's
It has
the
been
slab.
since that
Because of the
area,
slab, yeah.
that 38,000 feet was paved over.
So,
Yes,
Okay.
it has gotten progressively worse.
Yeah.
It is out Marcy Lee, 28 Glenmere Street. I live right on the other side of the Bears. Currently, I think I have the only dry basement in the neighborhood, so that's probably gonna change now that they're gonna be putting more water closer to my house, because again,
Or
water,
would there be more?
you're adding more water. You're directing the water off of the property, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, over to the back behind Mrs. Ucka's property, which is across the street from my property, which is all the same ground. So it's absorbing, it's adding water to the general area. So everybody's basement floods on that street except for mine currently. The end of the street has always had water. It's always been Little Lake Glenmere. Now it's coming up past the Bears driveway. Like that is, it's gotten progressively worse, and it has been since ICS has been there. I remember when they paved, it's been well over 18 months. They did it without anyone knowing. I complained about it nonstop because for 2 days straight, they had nonstop beeping going back there, dumping it. Town was aware that something was going on. Nobody knew what, nobody was paying attention, whatever, they did do it. They knew they were doing wrong. They're progressively doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We've got idling trucks for hours on end. They've told us that they're gonna put up signs stating that the trucks are not gonna be idling. They can't idle. I call them, tell them their trucks are idling. They tell me to call the cops, hang up on me. It's constant problems with them. They absolutely paved it without anyone knowing on purpose. They got caught and now they're trying to mitigate.
That wouldn't come before this.
The fence that's
This
going
is a
across the street.
problem.
I came home from work one day and that fence was there across the road. Just,
well, I mean, if it's their property, they have the right to put a fence
How
up.
high is the proposed vertical curb?
Yeah, I know.
6 inches.
6 inches.
that goes back to
What
us
do you think
asking
of-
for it when
what's
our
your
kids were
opinion of
young,
what the
and we were
folks are
told by the
saying?
town we couldn't.
Yeah,
Well, I don't
things
live
have
up
changed big time.
Okay, so I don't know what it
Bylaws.
looked like 30
Yeah,
years
I
ago.
know.
You're looking at the elevations and all that, yeah.
What I know is that at this corner of the paved area back here, I'm at elevation 77.5.
Yeah,
I know at this area I'm at elevation 72.
yeah.
So the water is flowing in this direction to the wet.
It's a 5-foot drop.
The 5-foot drop on the paved area. The area that's newly paved is draining back to this wetland that I'm being told is what's responsible for flooding Glenmere Street,
Yeah.
which is not the direction that the water is flowing. So something's flooding Glenmere Street, without a doubt,
Above,
New.
from
perhaps?
somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's something new. It's not this.
But that wetlands is in back of Spring Street,
Right.
so it's affecting the houses all up and down Spring Street in their backyards.
So they're gonna intercept the water on the back side with the new drainage, pipe it out.
And as you all know, when we do a drainage design, okay, we're presented with these condition that we're presented with. We calculate a flow going to the wetland, and our design is not allowed to send any more water to that point. That's why we're here, for these folks or their review agent to review it and say, yes, we concur, you're not going to make a flooding situation any worse.
Because currently, it's just sheeting right off into that wetland area.
And nothing's holding it
which,
back.
if it is a heavy rain event, it is going to back up to an extent upstream or uphill.
Sure.
By putting this storm infiltration system in underground, you're
Right.
gonna capture all that runoff that's going into that wetland now and controlling it, leaving that structure.
That's correct. And it's gonna
So
go to
it's
the
either
same
gonna
point.
infiltrate right where the structure is put, and if it overflows, then it will release. But it's set to hold most of that water that you're now seeing
So it doesn't
drain
flood.
right off
So it
into
doesn't
that
flood
structure.
right
Do you
into it.
folks see where the water is do you see it flowing into your area, or it's just sort of there?
It just builds up.
It just builds up.
It's coming up,
It just builds up over time. My
but
proposal
there
to
isn't
the
a flow from the property.
No, my proposal from to the selectmen was to have the town, dig a trench and rock it and everything.
Yeah.
But once they found the foundation, that was it. They just walked away, just threw their hands up.
Guess
And
I'm
they
trying to
made a
determine what
mess
we
out-
can do here versus.
Yeah, no, but they
yeah.
made a mess out of Mrs. Lucker's property and then just walked
They
away.
left everything
was-
there.
So,
Excuse Denise Reyes, 48 Columbus Ave. What is cart storage?
Through the chair. Cart storage is, they just have carts on wheels that you would see at Home Depot or something like that they store plants on. That's just all that's back there is those carts.
So they
Yeah.
store the plants on them for how long?
Generally, I believe plants come in and plants go out in the next day or two, I believe.
So in a 90-degree day in the summer, do they water the plants out there?
They do have provisions out there to be able to water the plants, yes.
So they are creating more water. It's not just natural water,
That
it's
is
through the
correct.
operation.
Through that, they would. In times when
Okay.
it's not raining, they would be watering those plants in a controlled fashion, obviously, but yes, they'd be
All right,
creating
I
water.
have some more questions.
Yep.
Do those plants contain fertilizer?
No fertilizer is what I'm told.
There's nothing. It's 100% pure soil,
That is my understanding.
and they're not using they're not adding any fertilizer?
No fertilizer is on site.
Okay, no pesticides are being used on any of those plants?
Agreed, that is
And
my
you're
understanding.
100% certain of that?
That's what I am told by my client.
Oh, that's what you're
Unfortunately,
told
I
by the client?
don't own the
Okay.
place, but that's what I'm told.
Okay, so there is more water being added, because if you're watering plants, it's not just rainwater, so there is more water being added.
It'll go into the drainage system though.
Yeah, the
I'm
drainage.
just concerned about what is going into the ground. I mean, this pad wasn't there before, so there's flooding issues. And now we also have an issue with some things being introduced.
Mr.
Well,
Bear,
okay.
I have a question in terms of this map that's up here, your property is to the right at Glenmere, right? And then Miss Ucka's is to the left.
Yes.
Where is this foundation that you're talking about? Just so I have a,
There's a fire hydrant.
Is it
Right where you are.
right where that cursor
right
is?
there?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, what I can say, what I can offer is this, and I don't know what it will help, but the last time that we had this meeting with the planning board and there was some complaints about the flooding, we were able to get with the town, our legal team, and they went out there. If we can dig a little more and say, hey, why can we finish this job and maybe help alleviate the situation, I'd be glad to reach out on my end and see if there's something that us or our legal team can do.
And also, is there any drainage at the end of the streets of
No,
your
sir,
street?
that's what I proposed.
So that's,
Can
The
I,
town put something in there
Sounds
for
like
that
the
purpose.
problem. Yeah.
so that could be a problem,
the whole, the,
part of it.
Mhm.
But I
There's,
haven't,
there's never been drainage on the street, and we've been there
Which is
30 years, they've never
town
paved the
issue.
road, nothing.
They've never paved the road or anything like
They've
that?
never
No,
done
it's a
anything, the
mess.
town's never done anything to our road.
So,
We're the last ones to get plowed, it's,
but I have a follow-up, to what his comment was, and that is that this, company that's next door to us is a distributor for Home Depot. And myself and my wife, over the summer of many, many years, purchased plants from Home Depot. Those plants, sir, come in with fertilizer inside of them.
Absolutely.
Every single one of them. I don't care what your client says. He's lying to you.
Okay, I'll take it up with
There's
him.
fertilizer in every one of those plants, and that's another concern. That's why I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. Because that is another concern. There's no way they can ship plants from somewhere else and have them grow without fertilizer being in there. They'd die. They would die.
And the controlled watering, I don't know what the definition of controlled watering is, but it's plants on carts with sprinklers. The same sprinkler you put in your front lawn is, spraying at these plants. So it's spraying on the plants, they're draining through the ground, and there's whatever fertilizer now in the ground. So, I mean, I don't know what your definition of controlled watering
does,
is,
not
but
to,
it's,
this just throws
that's
a little
what
bit
it
off,
is.
but does anybody here, have a company come out and do their lawn, fertilize and everything like that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think
Just
I
wondering.
think we all agree, we've all agreed, we've used fertilizer at one point or another, but we're not a commercial plant company, and as we all know, we have a PFAS issue in this town. We just don't wanna see anything
But
come out.
I don't think that's under the purview of this committee, is it?
No.
I
Should be a
don't think it
concern.
is, but.
Just had a
What do you
quick question.
No, but there are state regulations for nitrogen and phosphorus, loading into areas, and depending on what I come from a nursery background, so I
Yeah.
understand what they're doing.
Right.
And what they are bringing in is pre-fertilized by the grower.
Okay.
And probably 80% of the material that's shipped gets done before it gets shipped into the market,
Okay.
so it's all pre-fertilized. Most of what they're putting in is a controlled release fertilizer. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6
Over time.
months to break down and release all of the nutrients that are in it.
Mhm.
So it's basically a heat and water soluble capsule.
That makes sense, sure.
And depending on the amount of heat that it gets and the amount of water it gets, it starts to release the nutrients that it needs to release. So most of what the fertilizer that's coming in is already on it when they get it.
Mhm.
I would believe what he's saying and telling you is that they don't have fertilizer on site. I believe that.
Mhm.
As far as pesticides or chemicals, that I don't know.
But to
They do have to regulate the stormwater if they are
Yeah.
using a lot of phosphorus and nitrogen.
So it doesn't, we're concerned is the wetlands usually is what
So
we're
it isn't
concerned, what's
overloading the
flushing
system.
into the wetland.
But
Now,
And-
if I may, just to that end, I'm sure you know, and this commission knows too, when you are overloading a wetland or a water body even with certain nutrients, phosphates, nitrates, things like that, there's usually some evidence of it in the wetland, right? You can usually see an algae bloom or something like that.
Mm.
We don't see this back there. Okay, so, and this condition unfortunately has been happening for quite some time now, where they're storing plants and watering them, and the water is just draining to the wetland now.
Mm.
And
Yeah, just, I'm concerned to Howard Street, I just wanna make sure I understand, I've lived there for 24 years, and that soccer field is always a swimming pool. That's always issues around that, it takes forever to dry up. You're telling me that there's not gonna be any more residual water coming toward that at all?
Yes, the area that you see, the little square that you see off the back of the building, that will collect stormwater and pipe it into the ground and then control its release.
So what you're showing, for the people that live in back of that on Howard Street, are they
Mhm.
gonna be affected in any way from the volume of water going in there?
No, because it's all just going back into the ground. We've done soil analysis that show that the ground can accept it. We have adequate separation to the groundwater table, that we're required to have things like that. So that water's just gonna recharge back into the ground. And then our stormwater report shows that where we're connecting back to the catch basin in the driveway off of Howard is we're matching the flows to that spot. So we're not sending any more water to that location than goes there in the pre-development condition.
I have have a concern there. Could you please show me this unauthorized pavement, the extent that was put in?
Yeah, let me highlight it for you. So, let me get a different color. So this orange line through here is your 100-foot buffer zone.
Yeah. Too bad he couldn't do it on the. That's the only piece that was unauthorized, that was put in, unpermitted?
No,
They-
the whole thing.
It's the whole thing was not permitted, but this is the only thing within the Concom jurisdiction.
Right.
The whole area extends through here.
Well, see,
This spot right here.
yeah, I understand that in terms of Concom. However, this impacts this. So that this whole area has,
And that's why the stormwater
That's-
bylaw,
That's where the stormwater
Triggered.
bylaw comes in,
And then,
so.
yeah.
I understand that, but why don't we make them take all this out? It was unauthorized.
well, it would be authorized under the stormwater permit.
Which is why we're here now, to get post-authorized. Obviously.
I mean, we could make him take it out, he can
Without
apply
doubt.
for the permit and be allowed to do it. So, is it gonna make more damage to the environment to dig out everything that's there and then, or fix the problem that's now created and bring it up to code?
So it's
What
easier
are
to
the
ask
elevation
for
heights
like
on
an
that
apology.
concrete part?
Yeah.
Is that con-
It's easier
okay.
to apologize than it is to ask for permission.
Frankie, you need that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
61 Spring Street, Frank Canizaro.
Gentlemen,
Good.
Question regarding the elevation heights on the concrete. You had mentioned that the side street there was at 77 feet and the parking lot was at 75, if I remember correctly?
Through the chair, I've got an elevation, a spot elevation on Glenmere of 76.5 roughly,
Yeah.
and the driveway at 75.
And what is the concrete pad at?
Concrete pad in this location back here is at 77, 76, 75, it's going this way.
Yeah, I understand that, but is that also sloped back towards that street that we're having flooding problems?
This side is higher along here.
But it's catching like a circular part there that if we heavy rainstorm, it's gonna pool there, right?
It gullies and then it flows out this way, this is the
I'm just
relief
saying that
valve.
could relate to part of these people's problems where there should be, if you're gonna, that should be addressed where you've created like a bowl.
Yeah. One of the things that the planning board asked us to do was go out there and retopo Glenmere and prove that the water wasn't going there, so that's what we did. So we do have the topography that shows that water flows downhill and it flows down to the wetland, not to Glenmere.
Mike Bear, 32 Glenmere Street, sorry. So, when they came out to assess or do these configurations, one man was on Glenmere Street at the bottom, and the other guy was at my high point in my driveway, in my grass, when they did this. So I'm curious as to what level of elevation are you going by? The middle of my grass, which is high, or are you going by the low of Glenmere Street?
The spot elevation that I'm referring to is right here in your front yard.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah,
elevation
that's
we're
higher.
trying to get
He
to.
was up
That's
against
higher
my
than the
house.
street.
He was up on the hill in my front yard.
Okay.
That, so if you bring that straight across, you're looking seriously, sir, at a 3 foot, maybe 4 foot difference from ground to street.
That's-
Okay, so I will make it a point to go back and have my surveyors resurvey the property, and maybe they can do it right this time.
You guys can just come out and see the end of the street, like, I urge you to. Take a look. You'll see that when you look under the fence, you're looking up.
And Ronnie?
Go back to the south side, back to Howard Street, and that basin. My concern with that basin is you're showing a drain in there that's going over a water main, first of all, and you're gonna be adding more water to that basin. That basin can just about take the water now that's going in there. I'm gonna ask you if you've done calculations and you know that the flow rate is gonna take what you are gonna put into it, because that line was rebuilt by the town of West Bridgewater back in the 80s. And that basin is tied in, like you said, to the other side of Howard Street, and then that line goes straight to the town river. And because they couldn't get rid of the water, so the town did that. However, you're adding more flow to it, you're putting another basin into it, and my line comes from that basin onto my property, so whenever that floods, that's gonna be flooding my property. So I'm very concerned that you've done the calculations and can show me what the calculations are, and that the flow, the pipes are big enough to take the flow.
So,
That's a simple
so through the chair,
situation.
I will say again, we have done the calculations to prove that we are not sending any more water there now in the post condition that goes there now. So we're not sending more water to that location.
No.
However, we can agree to do a culvert analysis and make sure that that pipe is adequate to take the flow that is proposed to go to it.
And that's one reason why I asked, though, too, have you looked inside of it to make sure?
And that's a good point. We should
And
take a
that
look.
it's nothing that's clogged over the years, or it's kind of like built up rust over the years. I mean, if it's not gonna show, it's not gonna hold it, then you'll be able to see that through.
We'll be able to see that with the camera.
Okay,
Sure.
so,
I'd like that line also shown from that basin on the plan. It's hardly even shown on the plan, but I want that distinctly shown in your plan, and that it's a legal pipe to be there. It can't be cut off because it's taken this owner's property up at the corner of, towards Turner Steel. That whole lot flows across my property and goes into the drainage, into that line in that basin.
well, nothing's gonna be
And
cut
that's the
off.
way they were calculated.
Nothing's gonna be cut off. It's gonna be used. That pipe's gonna still be used.
That's correct.
Nothing's gonna be cut off.
What's that?
You said something about you didn't want it to be cut off, the,
No, I want to make sure that the line always stays.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
It isn't just for me, it's for him too, because.
oh, I mean, it's gotta stay in order for it to work for him. Yeah,
No, I don't, I just want to make sure that it stays, it has to.
yep.
So you're offering to resurvey just to ensure the local residents that
We'll check them for the third time. You know, we've been out, this will be the third time that we've been out there. We can
What
come up and
changed?
get some spot grades.
between the two,
Nothing.
nothing.
And
Why would it change now?
in my opinion, I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but that little piece there with the 50-foot,
Yeah.
I would like to see that be cut off and
Outside of the 50.
outside the 50 and put back to the way it's supposed to be.
Understood.
And, but also now with the 53G,
Mhm.
you should,
I'm just thinking, you may end up wanting to go that route just because of the drainage calculations and the amount of surface water we're dealing with.
In this case, I would be comfortable with that.
you'd be okay with it?
Yep.
That way it's professionally done.
Yep. That way, and what the 53
Not
feet
that
is, just so
they're
everybody
not
knows.
professional, and this is the second party that's doing it.
That's
To
looking out
overlook for
the
that, what they're
Conservation
doing,
Commission
and
the public's
overlooking
interest.
us.
Engineer, yeah.
So if that's gonna be okay with the people, that
So there's
we're,
another set of eyes.
we're doing
looking
it,
at
yeah,
this
like a
whole
third party, I guess, or.
Yeah, it's a
second
third-party engineer that the commission hires, that the applicant's expense to review my work to make sure I haven't screwed
And
something
that way you guys aren't
Well,
saying
can I
that
go
he's doing
back to
something
the-
wrong. Yep.
surveying, because I work from home.
Yep.
And I was sitting in my office overlooking the surveyors who were standing next to my bedroom up on my lawn. So I don't know where they're supposed to stand, because I buy furniture, I don't know anything about surveying. But they were up against my house surveying, so I
depends on a
don't know
lot of
anything
things.
about that.
Right, as part of it, they would, but I'm certain that that's not the only place that they stood when they were out there.
I
They
know they were
surveyed the
way off
neighborhood.
in Mrs. Utka's yard too.
They were, because
Way
they,
down.
they tracked this,
Yeah.
the elevations and the drainage swale that the town cut in and all that stuff, so they were all over the place.
All right,
Thank you, because I'm
so
not,
Understood.
I'm not,
Sure.
yeah.
I would entertain a motion to, for 53G, to review the project.
Mhm.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And,
It's a question.
oh, go ahead.
I'd like to know, what are the trees and everything you're gonna be cutting down?
The trees that we're cutting down?
Yeah,
We're actually not proposing to cut any more trees down to do this work. The trees are gonna stay right where they are now.
yeah.
Yep.
'Cause I'm down on Spring Street, and your land is runs right behind my backyard.
They've cleared it all. This is,
Huh?
they already destroyed everything that they're gonna destroy.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that.
I have a concern with that.
Eat off
I have a
the
concern with that. If it's been a done deal, you've already done it, how are you gonna
Hopefully it
replace it?
favors these people.
Right,
Thank you.
How are we gonna
Exactly.
replace what?
trees that have already been cut down.
Yes, we are not proposing to replant trees at this time. The area that's left is very well treed. We're not proposing to put those trees back in. There is, again, if the commission wanted to require some sort of restoration plantings, they would be limited to this orange line that you see through here. That's the area of jurisdiction. If the commission feels strongly about it, but my opinion on that is that in order to go back now and replant trees, the best we could do is an interplanting. Otherwise, we would just be cutting down more trees to plant new trees, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
And that's Tim's expertise too, so.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna do more damage
More
than good
damage
by.
than
that's
Yeah, and the
why
way, I'm
digging
sure the way
everything
it
out
is,
to
it'll,
put it back in.
it'll grow back pretty quick,
I
so.
mean, putting in, I mean, if you're
Not coming back anymore.
gonna decide to have them remove the area that's within the 50-foot,
We'll put some stuff in there.
and then, right, you plant and or seed that, and then everything that's already there, looking at the vegetation, it's going to regrow back out to its natural vegetated spot.
So
Fairly quick.
if the elevations are confirmed again, and you folks are saying you're still getting excessive water, is that more of a town issue? Probably.
I will also reach out to the
Sure.
highway department,
Yeah.
talk to Chris tomorrow, and find out what he found out and what else on our end the town might be able to do to get, because it looks like on your plan, the drainage ditch doesn't go the whole length. And if that's because they hit a foundation, then let's figure out how we,
How to rectify that.
yeah,
Sure.
Okay,
fix
one,
that situation.
one more question.
Yeah, I did. Mike Bear, 32 Glenview Street. Yeah, excuse me, I just lost my thought.
Just flew away, huh?
Yes, sir. The older I get, the quicker
I
it
know the
goes.
feeling.
It was a good point, too.
How's our time run on a 53G?
Oh, I
They're all
do- I
busy,
remember.
I'm sure.
So we met with the selectmen, and now we're meeting with you. So questions that we presented with the selectmen still haven't been rectified, so now we're sitting here before you tonight. And one of them is, like Marcy said, the idling of the vehicles, of the trucks. Now, at the last selectmen meeting we were at, we were told that the big 18-wheelers would not be coming down to our end of the street, that they were all gonna be unloaded at the front of the building and carted back with the forklifts. I have countless pictures, again, all different times of the day, of 18-wheelers sitting out there, unloading their trucks, running their engines, and just running and running and running. And the thing is that the issue is that within that area where that building goes up,
Echoes,
it
yeah.
echoes big time. I mean, you can hear it to the end of Glenmere Street.
So who deals with that?
Well,
issue?
unfortunately,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not us.
Right,
that-
Right.
but I can give you a
can't
little
complain on it.
insight.
Yeah.
The zoning board, because this isn't a use change, doesn't have jurisdiction, it's a planning board site plan review process. The planning board is ongoing with their meetings on this as we are. They meet tomorrow night. This is on their agenda tomorrow night,
It is.
yes.
I was not aware of that.
It may be just as an update, and if there's no update, then there's nothing to be given. But
It's a good time to get there.
part of the process on the planning board side, it does not trigger a butter notification. So that's why you did not hear anything about the planning board reviewing anything.
We've asked to be notified
Right, well, the
anytime
planning,
it's on the agenda by the planning. board.
right.
Yeah.
That's why, but you didn't get the green cards like you did for this. Because this process requires a butter notification within 300 feet, so you all get the green cards. The planning board process that they're going through does not require that. You can contact them and request it and ask them for notification. But it's not required by law for them to have to make sure the cards go out.
And exactly what you said, sir, is exactly how that big area out back got paved.
Yes. Yeah.
So just heads up, check the planning board schedule, they do post it on the town website.
Maybe that could be something that could be brought up about, maybe put it in as a rule,
But that's,
that the
I mean,
abutters
that's
would
the
have
alternative. I
to.
mean, somebody did
get
call me and
limited.
ask about the lighting, the street lighting, or the parking lot lighting and how it was gonna be cast and all that. I do know a little bit about that, but that's the planning board's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So if you have questions of that type, definitely go to the planning board, and if, again, call in tomorrow to town hall and find out what's actually on the agenda for it. And if, again, it may be just, like we do, we'll put it on every single next meeting. A lot of times it may be continued 4 or 5 times before they actually come back in front of us with changes or updates.
Doesn't mean you can't go in there and ask though, too.
Right, and
Questions.
again, this will probably be continued, we'll put it on for the next 2 weeks, when our next meeting is, but there may not be time to
Yeah.
review changes, updates to the plans. So it may just be on the agenda, but we may not have a hearing on it.
And just, if I can, for everybody's information, the last time we spoke with the planning board, they said, come satisfy Concom and come back to us. We don't want to see you again until
Yeah.
Concom's done. So I'm not anticipating giving a presentation tomorrow night, I knew nothing about it.
Okay,
but I'm
that's
gonna
a
follow up.
So that's where the next update is, because the planning board probably wants to make sure that the drainage and elevations
Yeah.
are set before they go through and ask for any other changes or anything to be done. That's
Denise-
correct.
Denise?
Yeah, just one more question. So we really don't know how long they've been using that area for cart storage because no one seems to know exactly when it was paved. It could have been 18 months ago, who knows? My question is, so if they're out there watering plants all the time in this cart storage area, after how long might you see an effect on the wetlands?
What would you say, Adam? I don't know
If
what that one.
there was a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, you're gonna see that within a growing season. So typically 9 months to 12 months, you'd start to see, I mean, one sure sign would be the lowest spot where it's all draining
Yeah,
to
would
is
be
gonna have
died.
vegetation growing twice
Yeah.
as fast as anywhere else.
So that's something we'd want to look for next
Right.
spring.
So that if it's been 12 months, you'd be
You could
seeing
probably
it
even go
now.
out there now and look at it. Maybe there's this discoloration and all that stuff in the area.
Right, things they're gonna be greener, they're gonna be lusher, they're
Yeah.
gonna be
I mean, it's not-
healthier than just the natural
No.
plants in the area.
You should take some preventative caution then with the collection system that you're putting in. I understand it filters oils and gasolines and that sort of product. Shouldn't there be something there to filter nitrogens then, if they're gonna continually do this process for next 10, 20 years there?
It's something that we can certainly look into. I don't believe that the nitrogen loading that we're talking about warrants that type of a system, but it's something that we can take a look at.
And again, most of what they have, for the most part, is their short-term, 2, 3, 4 days. So it's sitting there, it's getting,
Washover though, if they're watering it, it comes out of the containers.
right, if it spills, falls
There's
over,
Flashover.
but that's where you have
And if
an
they
issue
get the
with it.
product every week after week after
And
week, it's still there.
And
Yeah.
it's loose because they're just
Yeah.
planted the seedlings, it's loose, it blows it off.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking long term,
Right.
if they're gonna be there for 10,
Something to-
15 years, it's a long term problem, and
Yep.
you're just looking short term right now.
Okay, Denise?
Could we also find out if they're treating that area with any kind of pesticides?
I'll find out.
What do you mean by treating that area?
Well, like.
Oh, you mean the plants? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought you
the
meant by
plants.
the wetland area.
No, the plants
Yeah, you-
for that area, if they're either coming in
Find out,
treated
yeah.
or if they're treating it.
I'll confirm.
All right, well, go ahead.
Just one more quick question. If they're opening that up to tenants, right, is there a description of what type of tenants do they allow? Like, could it be another trucking company? Could it be something along those lines? And then what, I just,
So there are uses allowed in certain zoning districts. So what they're proposing at this time is a use that would just be allowed in this zoning district, whatever that may be. I don't have that little schedule of uses in front of me. If they wanted to do something that's not allowed in the district, they would have to go before the ZBA for special permission, in which case you folks would all be notified again, so you would know that it's coming, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, the proposal is by right.
So, everybody okay with the 53G and everything, looking on into it? Third pair eyes and all that stuff? Okay, so, well, good.
Do we need a motion at all to
Um,
make sure that they don't have this, they gotta redo that at this point? or
yeah,
later?
well,
I don't know if it's a motion, but if I'm understanding.
I'm
special,
asking-
I'll do a
asking-
special condition to,
No, it's, you've already said that you don't want it in the 50-foot, so it's up to them to
Yeah,
figure out a replanting plan.
so
and
when you come back
remove it.
with to us, you'll have that all
Yeah.
gone and all that
I'm
stuff.
gathering there's
yeah.
no support for that waiver, so it's in our best bet to get it out of there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I'll just make a second, how you guys feel about that?
Oh, yeah.
Leave it the way, okay.
We
Okay,
understand.
so I will entertain a motion to continue to December 20th?
We'll just pick the 2 weeks and continue if we have to.
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Second? I mean,
Second. Second.
all in favor, sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, guys.
I don't think anyone's here, so we can do that.
Thank you, guys. Yes. Yeah, no, we're definitely going.
It's the only little part of
planning
town that was done
Obviously,
like that.
something's up there.
Because of what it
How
was,
needs
so.
to get there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it's the
we're
town.
on the site plan review.
has nothing
We were
to do with
supposed to be
these
notified, and, yeah, we've been to every meeting on it, and
We'll
we got
keep
town
going,
council
we'll
involved.
keep
We-
going.
Yeah.
No,
Try.
we're here trying to make it easier for you guys.
Remember,
Believe it
we
or
all
not, we're
live-
not here
we all
to,
live here.
we want things to change to make it for
Yeah.
the better for everybody. But there could be issues on your side with the town. That could be a town issue,
Exactly.
especially when there's no drainage in that area, so, and these,
And I think Denise can be an advocate for that.
yeah. I mean, and with these storms that we're having lately, we can understand where the water comes from, but Denise can have a lot to do with that though, too.
Just thank you for understanding that I'm.
Oh, we-
No, I
We
understand.
see it all the time,
Understand a
don't
lot.
feel
No,
bad.
we're glad that you're here, giving
Yep.
voice to the concerns that you have, otherwise we don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Have a
coming.
great
Absolutely,
night.
you too.
Too.
Yeah, we just don't have the jurisdiction that people
No,
think we do.
not the zoning area and all that. Okay, so,
All right,
the next issue is 38 United Drive,
We just-
under the continued public hearing.
Ask if you would like, you could probably take 35, 38, and 40 and do it as one lump continuance to the next meeting.
Okay,
Sounds
so
great.
38, 35, and 40,
Thank you.
just continue it, or you
2
want to have,
weeks,
you got something to say on it? Anything to say?
They
on it?
are still doing the review, updating a bunch of plans, and they actually were talking today amongst the two engineers to get stuff straightened out, so hopefully by next meeting, we'll at least have 35 United Drive.
Okay.
The other two are gonna take a considerable amount. There's site plan and zoning and stuff that's also in play, so that's why we haven't seen them come back.
Okay, so I entertain a motion to continue 38, 35, and 40 United Drive to December 20th.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And next one is Lincoln Street and West Center Street, general
She's here.
stormwater management.
I saw her there.
She's up there. Yep, she's up there.
And I know
Stephanie.
Stephanie's here, and I can give a report if she'd like, because I did get an email from the consultant doing the review, and they have signed off.
Okay, good.
Oh, my goodness.
I like the smile.
I want to hear you say it for real.
I had a discussion with him in the morning, and then I think they reached out to Stephanie with a few questions, and he said he'd get back to me before the meeting and thought everything could be resolved, so.
All right.
Yes. Excellent. And I just sent you an email with all of the updated, just supplemental information and updated plans at the start of this meeting or just after it started.
I will say the only thing that we will probably have to do is because you have the two basins, the one that's on the development side and yours connected, we're gonna have to just modify the development side's stormwater management permit that was issued. But that's a minor thing that I've already reached out to the Silver Engineering to take care of. So it shouldn't be a big deal.
So that, we're done.
Yes,
So,
it's not gonna hold anything up. It's
so
just
I'll,
paperwork.
She's frozen.
When do we issue the permit, though?
You can do that tonight.
yep, I'm just gonna do that, do that now.
So you can,
She's stunned.
No, she's frozen.
you froze.
She'll come back.
So should we wait?
Yeah, wait for her.
But that, she doesn't really have any more to report, so you guys can close the meeting and issue the permit tonight if you so do.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll entertain a motion to issue general stormwater management permit.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
She fainted.
Now I wonder when that's gonna get started. So I wonder when that's gonna get started
Please
now.
let me know.
Tomorrow.
'cause I'm gonna get off on 123 and Brockton.
Yeah, good idea. Well, they haven't started the highway yet, but
No.
won't be long.
All right, the next one is off West Street, off Old West Street, abbreviated notice of resource area delineation.
And we've finally gotten everything straightened out, and I think we're ready to put this one to bed as well.
Yes, I'm happy to give that update here. So, first of all, thanks for the permission. This is Andrew Tebow of Goddard Consulting, representative for it. We also have Scott Goddard from my office, Steve Gallagher from AMD, and Tracy Duarte from MBL on Zoom with us tonight, and they may speak up at times.
It's convoluted, huh?
So this has been a long-standing review. We had filed, back in the spring. We had paused it for a while. We had
If I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna, Stephanie, I just wanna let you know, we closed the hearing and issued the permit.
Perfect, thank you so much.
You guys are all set, and I'll get that all taken care of for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Night, Stephanie.
Great update, thank you. Yeah, so as of last week, Tim had essentially finalized his field review. We spoke yesterday. We decided just to meet out on site and kind of address all of his final comments. So yesterday we just took a quick walk kind of to the top of the property up here. We took a look at his only area in question, ultimately decided that the area didn't meet any of the vegetation requirements for wetlands under the bylaw or Wetlands Protection Act. So at this point we left the site in agreement that the delineation has been agreed upon. And the current plan in front of you guys now, although busy, is an accurate representation of the wetlands on site. So at this point, the only outstanding comments that you kind of had for us were that eventually we're going to get you a site plan with the culvert shown just to map the hydrologic connections. But since the delineation has been fully agreed upon and this has been kind of ongoing for a while, we do hope to close it to the public tonight and then get you the final plan to issue the ORED with. While we do all have you here with the team, we did want to open a conversation about kind of the jurisdiction of isolated wetlands on the site. There's been kind of some back and forth. We've been looking at reading through the bylaw, and I know it's been kind of the commission's historic way to take jurisdiction over isolated wetlands. In reading the bylaw, we were having a hard time kind of deciphering where that jurisdiction comes from and how they're regulated. So we kind of just wanted to talk to you guys tonight about how these are regulated and kind of the implications associated with that.
Okay. So we've typically, any isolated wetland, we've called it a wetland, and we've always looked at it that way. We do, on pre-developed sites, kind of use our discretion as far as what was previously disturbed, what was man-made, what was created, and try to work through getting nature back to where it was
Can be a little more amenable to different things, yeah.
But if it's been there long enough to create a wetland,
it's a wetland.
It's a wetland, is how we've looked at it. But again, like I said, some sites in a development can improve what was disturbed. So it's
There's a lot of isolated.
There are, and there is previous disturbance. Much of the top layer soil was stripped on the site, and so there is a lot of room on the site, for improvements and mitigation. We're looking up the definitions, of freshwater wetland versus swamp, bog defined in the town, and so we kind of wanted some clarification on how those areas are going to stand moving forward. Now that we've agreed that they are all isolated.
So, what have we agreed upon now? What's the wetland we're looking at?
So, yeah, this plan was submitted to you guys back a ways now. The only thing we have supplemented since then was on November 7th. We just gave Tim a plan with some more elevations added just to ease his review process. So all we have here was our originally submitted delineation for the site. This is just a cover page, just because if I'm start scrolling through for you guys, it's going to get messy with a complicated site. So the actual site plan submitted to you guys had it broken down by sheet in each area of the site and kind of sectioned. So the hash mark that you see up here was essentially the area that we agreed that we don't need the NRED for.
If I might.
Please do.
John Delano, before he left.
Yes, you have
on the original plan.
Oh, this is
brought his coloring book.
Yeah.
And each map he did, but he did overlay where the solar panels were.
Excellent, yes.
Because it doesn't show up on that one. So this might help you understand the blue hashtagged areas are all the wetlands. And then these are those isolated pockets that have
gotten water.
been created.
Great, okay.
Exactly, yeah, so it's part of this
land
process.
stripping, land clearing, altering
I think that's
what
fair
was
to say.
there. I mean, the tough part with this one is, and that was what took so long, was I asked them to put on the elevations. And so you can't really tell sometimes where those man-made pockets, where the elevations originally were, because everything, like you said, has been stripped off of it. So it's,
Yeah, so part of the long review for this was just ensuring that these areas were indeed isolated, so that was kind of what we have now finally agreed upon as of yesterday, actually, so.
So you just did the delineation then?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we have no clue as to what's gonna be done in there, but.
No, yeah, at this time, we wanted to solidify bordering versus isolated, all the wetlands on site, and kind of just get that in plan with so much going on out there.
There sure is, yeah.
So, do you work for the company that's with the solar panels?
I'm a
anything like that?
representative of Goddard
Just a
Consulting,
rep-
so we just flag the wetlands and then file the
Okay.
grant application. We do have representatives for VMD and MBL who are working on the plans. The solar that is existing there has been there. They're not a part of the NRED process. That is just been on site since I believe 2020, 2021.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's finally done though.
Yes, yeah.
A lot of work.
Right. And our plans show the stormwater detention basins in the areas that were not associated with the wetland line. I
Sure.
believe Tim located the old plans to take a look at all those to agree that there are areas that were built for stormwater management in that area.
So then, what this means for us then, when we, so this is the agreed upon wetlands, all the blue.
Right, the blue is,
So it means, so when the next person comes in and wants to develop, these are the things that we'll be concerned with.
right, those blue areas of what they can do and where they can do it, and figuring out, is this isolated wetland really a wetland that's a
That's right.
benefit
That's
to
right.
what's there, or can this one be relocated next to a wetland area that's already there, which will be a better benefit?
So
I
you mean like,
Because it,
this one would be better up here? There was
right,
a
or
problem?
was this really connected to this or that, or this one here really was dug out and it
What
should.
was there before? There was
It was old
something going on
fields, I
there.
believe.
I think, didn't
Forested
some,
it.
did
Yeah,
you say
that's really-
something about forested, and then there wasn't like with the railroad or something like that?
Railroad.
Well, there was an old railroad bed that goes through it and divides the property.
So they
And if
got
you
it.
look at it, you can see, this is the railroad bed,
Mm.
which actually goes behind Component Park that we were just talking
Yes.
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it actually connected to the rail trail on the other side over
Yeah.
here. So this rail bed kind of breaks this in this wetland area.
So who knows what they
Separates.
did in
And that's
that
why I was
area.
concerned with the stone culverts that were there,
Yeah.
being able to connect that water system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we know that was already disturbed by the railroad when they went through.
And I know years back, at least in that area, it was farm fields too.
Right.
And much of it has been stripped down.
Yeah.
A lot of soil has been removed from the site. So that was kind of what we were looking at, is to make sure they're all isolated. We took a look. I mean, there's certain areas on the site that, although they were stripped down, there's invasive species there, there's stuff like that. So there's a lot of room on the site for that kind of analysis. But we just, as part of this process, wanted to nail down the isolated versus the bordering.
Yep. All right.
There was nothing-
So
we
we
don't
do have
have an
teams
issue
on
with
Zoom as
permit.
well. I want to make sure that if they have any
Um,
questions, they
just
can
con-
do so.
Just,
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Scott Goddard. Could I interject a comment?
Yep, go ahead, Scott.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, so Andrew and I work together. I'm a professional wetland scientist and have spent many hours on this site. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into this. Thank you so much to the members of the commission and to Tim for all the hours that you put into this. And, you know, I, in some sense, I apologize that this has gone on for so long. Nobody likes to see something linger on the agenda for the months that this has. So thank you for bringing it to this point and the work that you put into it. So just kind of as a preview as to what's coming, you know, we do anticipate coming before you with a project. It's not designed yet, but there'll be a project that would likely anticipate, you know, reconfiguration or reworking some of these pocket areas that we've been talking about. Obviously, you know, the vast BVW on the site is valuable and will be protected, you know, under the Wetland Protection Act rules and regulations for this project. But all those little pockets, I think, are likely subject to you know, consideration for a future project. And so because of that, I think it's good that we sorted out what's isolated, what's bordering. That's for sure helpful. But I wanted to just, you know, vet that jurisdiction question a little bit further, and not in a way of being sort of contrary or argumentative, but just for my benefit, and what the commission decides is fine. But what I've seen in many towns, that have bylaws and rules and regulations where there's ambiguous language where it says things like, you know, we regulate all freshwater wetlands or something like that, then to further understand what's meant by that, the regulations, and yours are no exception to this, you know, it has definitions sections. And so there's a definition section under the bylaw and there's a definition section under the regulations. And in neither of those cases does it state that jurisdiction over freshwater wetlands includes non-bordering wetlands. The only thing that I could find was that there's a cross-reference to say where definitions aren't present in these bylaws to defer to the Mass Wetland Protection Act. So if I go to the Wetland Protection Act, that lands us in the bordering only kind of category as opposed to the isolated thing. So I've seen it happen in many towns where there's sort of a long-standing practice of exercising jurisdiction over isolated wetlands, you know, even if the bylaw isn't explicitly clear that that's the intent of the bylaw. Could you, I don't know if the commission's in a position to kind of vet that thought process out a little bit more, but it would help me to understand how we get there. Is it just a sort of, we've just always done it this way kind of a thing, or is there language in the bylaw and regs that get us there?
Ever since I've been involved, it has been under the interpretation that it's even if it's not a bordering, it's an isolated wetland connected to that system. We have had projects come before us that have been able to prove that that was not a connected, isolated wetland to the site. It's how we've done.
As far as I know too, it's like,
I think,
if it's connected, it's been protected
Right.
for that, if it's, can be proved that, in that way.
I think, that being said, I think we've tried to work with developers, depending on what they're attempting to do.
We've had a lot of
get
work farm
mitigation
community.
for other areas.
We've had a lot of cow water ponds created, and those are man-made structures that.
I mean, if it's a tiny, small, little isolated wetland, you know, maybe we can do some mitigation somewhere else.
From what it looks like in the future, this is the way this is gonna be that way.
Yeah, I do.
How do we
We're
go
gonna have to
about
do a lot of work and.
How do we go about proving if it's connected or not?
Well, that's what we did out in the field. That's part of the review process. So the ones we're showing as isolated now, we've determined are isolated, not connected to the other wetlands in the area. Right. So the plan does demarcate between bordering and isolated, and each wetland has its own label associated.
Right.
So given that, what does that say about us and whether we would determine what to do with it?
So if you don't wanna do anything with it, just say you can't do nothing with it, that's the way
We
it's
can
gonna
do
be.
what
If
we
we
want,
wanna
I
happen to
guess,
say,
within reason.
we can work with you and say, okay, if that's gonna be moved to get such and such project done, then okay, we'll let you move this one, but you gotta, we'll put it
I mean, looking at
connected
the way
to the
the
other.
land was cleared, some of those could have and most likely were connected to something.
Yeah.
Some of them were created because
Just
that
a
was
hole.
right. That's when they were scraping the ground, that's where the pressure
Digging
was,
out
and they
Yeah.
Boulders
it-
and stuff.
and it clearly is not
Yeah.
part of the original. But it's just where there were so many fingers and jags and jugs that came through it, and without any elevations to go by,
Yeah.
you can't figure out. I mean, the area in question that I was really racking my brain against, you look at the tall upper story canopy and the understory, and it's totally different, and you're talking in an elevation of a couple feet, if that change. And I mean, that's how close this was, so it's.
Well, what I think happened, and this is Scott again, what I think happened out here, based on my read of the landscape, is that clearly the land used to be much higher. If you look at the elevation of the elevated rail bed and the adjacent roadways, and they stripped out not only topsoil, but subsoil, and brought this site very low and flat, so that much of the site is not that far removed from the groundwater table, you know, and they sort of stopped when the land was getting a little squishy. So I think that's what ended up happening here. So I suspect all these locations that we're talking about that are isolated wetlands and whatnot, the land was probably much higher at one point, and this was these interceptions of the groundwater and the surface just occurred by over excavation of the site, in large part. That's what I suspect.
And didn't we think that we could
Go
possibly
ahead,
be
sorry.
that, even like with the railroad being there, that they purposely did that down so they could
Mound it,
load the,
I don't know yeah, it's hard to know the reason
Yeah.
or the timing of it. We could do some historical research, I suppose, but there's no natural topsoil and there's no natural subsoil. So the surface level that's there right now is all, you're looking at no A, no B, you're just somewhere in the sea horizon. So they probably cut that ground at least 24 inches, maybe several feet even beyond that. It's kind of hard to know, but there's no natural variability of the groundscape and inundations of topographical variations that indicate any kind of a natural landscape up there.
How big is the site in total?
That added the difficulty into the actual wetland line, because where they scraped, sometimes it went into the wetland and
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
it definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
there was really no
Yeah.
clear defined spot. So it's over time where it naturally started to vegetate and become its own wetland.
So if I understand correctly what Scott is saying then, is that it seems like maybe what he's going for, and correct me obviously if I'm wrong, Scott, with this, that your hypothesis is that all of these isolated wetlands are basically man-made, and because they're isolated or whatever, and the language in the bylaws that we do not have any say over that.
Even though the practice of the commission may have been different in some past cases, I do think that, and I've read hundreds of bylaws and have been through this issue a lot, I've been doing this 30 years, but I think that's how your bylaw is written and the intent of it, just by its own language. So, but I do think that we want to work with the commission with a future project and fully intend to come in with something that has abundant mitigation and improvements to the site from a wetlands perspective. So that these areas are recognized as features and need to be considered so that there's a net benefit to wetland function and value of this project, post-project. Even areas that may end up being found to be non-jurisdictional, we hope to propose a project to the board that you're very happy with and get increased wetland jurisdiction and a benefit of functions and values on the whole site. So I could see a scenario, and it's up to you how to play it, but I could see a scenario where there's a finding that those isolated wetlands are not jurisdictional per se under the bylaw in your ORAD that you issue, but with an understanding from us and our project team that when we come before you with a notice of intent, which we're going to have to for sure, that we, darn well better propose something that considers those areas and takes that into our design considerations.
Okay.
We do have discretion on it. Yeah.
For sure.
we don't mind working with you if you work with us.
That's exactly what we're approaching.
Right off
That's
the
why we
bat.
posed the question more so than just telling you.
Right off
outright
the
stuff,
bat.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we appreciate that from the commission, that kind of conversation. That's exactly what we're hoping for
That's
tonight.
really what it's all about anyway, working together.
And we absolutely plan to. There's a lot of room on this site for a lot of improvements, whether it be invasive species movement or continuity from,
Oh, sure.
a lot of these areas, so.
okay, so saying that, entertain a motion to close.
Motion to close, so I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And entertain a motion to order resource area delineation.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Done.
Thank you
Lot of
all.
walking.
And Tim, thank you for
Thank
your extensive
you.
overview. That was no small task to jump into, so we appreciate it very much.
Good luck.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Jen, just to clarify, Mr. Chairman or Tim,
Yep.
on the ORAD, what will the language state with respect to those isolated areas?
Why don't you get back to it?
Okay, very good.
Yeah, not quite sure how I'm gonna word this one in the wording, but.
Yeah, okay, very good. That sounds good, because you have 21 days to issue, so
Yeah.
you'll probably issue it at your next meeting, right?
Yes,
And do you have a date for that next meeting?
the 20th.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I like this map. Nice colors.
You like,
You can take
you
that,
like,
you can take it home and
Just take it home and look
you
at it.
like the old style.
I love that.
Is that what you got to take in the field, Tim? Is that
That was what I started with, and then I said, I need some elevations.
Yeah,
If you wanna take a peek, see,
we do what we can for you.
Yeah.
That's a
yeah,
lot of work.
and again,
How big is the
no
site, you know?
elevations on it.
Not really, I'm not sure, but I know it's
Is
I
it
big.
really
How
love
big's the
that.
site, Tim? How many is it? 10 acres, 8 acres?
88 or something like that, 60
I think 80 acres.
Yeah.
80?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's a very large
it's
site.
taken me a lot of walking miles.
Yes, that's why we didn't include the.
See a
northern
lot of
portion
houses
the site.
in
Hardly
there.
any kind of
In the
section.
northern portion, you have to basically cross the swamp to get to, so I appreciate that.
Yes, that, those
80
kind of
acres,
tracks are not
that's
needed.
80
That are
houses.
interested. There's a lot of good land over there, but thank you guys for working with us.
Thank you.
We'll touch base soon. Take care now.
Industrial, no.
Dude,
So Tim, thank you for doing all
There's
that
no
work.
access
Yeah.
to the
I mean,
highway though, is there? Right there.
No.
My goal was
I'm
to
sure
get it
they
done
could.
before
What
hunting
man
season
land?
opened.
I'm sure they could put something,
Could they?
if they had to, maybe, I don't know, but,
that'd be
It's a
huge.
big site.
all
Big
right.
site.
Back into 24.
Yeah.
All right, so the next one is just a minute, administrative talk, 586 Manley Street.
And both of those, no updates yet, nothing's been finalized with the property, so I
Okay,
would recommend continuing both till the 20th.
so, entertain a motion to continue both to the 20th?
20th, I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then,
I just have a other business and FYI
Miscellaneous.
that I was gonna give you a little info on. There's, a filing for next meeting that missed the deadline for this one by 1 day. I couldn't get it advertised in the paper enough. It's a failed septic system that has literally failed.
Yeah,
So they will be doing a after-the-fact filing on the 20th.
because
So
of
they wanna
that,
try to
sure.
repair it before the weather gets cold and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can't. So they're
Yeah.
probably gonna do it next week and then file. But they've gone through the Board of Health and all of that. And it's, the plans they have presented, everything is outside the 100-foot.
Yeah.
Or there's a corner of the slope that's in the 100-foot, but everything else is outside, so it's an RDA filing.
Okay.
And other than that, it's just a couple things to sign.
all right,
Great.
Where's the big one?
what's that? The big,
Lincoln Street.
Yes, getting those two things off the plate was nice,
uh-huh,
knowing that we have United Drive to tackle next.
We'll have that building up in no time.
I have
Well, the one
just a
behind the
couple
mobile
questions
station's gonna be
about
going up
process.
within
You
the
wanna
next
do
week or
this?
You
so.
know, I was
That
gonna
whole
go over and
plan.
take a peek. Have you
I just
gone
saw
over
it,
there?
well, I drove by, cause I usually get off
Will we
106,
see it?
because I look at the bridge and I'm like, well, I'm not going to go east, so
Oh,
I'll go
yeah,
west.
yeah, yeah.
And it's like,
So-
all of a sudden it was there, it was like,
Yeah,
land gone,
yeah.
you know, stone pad, like, I was like,
they're not going,
Everything's
they're
in.
not doing much around, next to the Honeydew one, though,
no, I don't know.
That's
What
just come
happened?
to a stop.
What's going on there? I don't know.
money-wise, maybe?
What's supposed to go there? How did it?
An
No,
apartment building,
4, 5-story?
4
or more.
stories.
Oh,
Five,
wow.
4,
I think
5-story?
it's 4 or 5, it's 24 units.
With garage underneath?
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of
They
people
was
aren't
on
happy.
that one.
They did what they could.
A lot of
you know,
people
in
aren't happy
terms
about
of-
that.
This is $900 for
It's a big one now, isn't it?
53 G's. Yeah.
Not us to worry about.
Are we
So when
supposed
we
to-
do a 53G,
supposed to
do we don't bid
initial
that
the other
anymore,
side?
do we? Have we ever done that, or do we
If
just
a real
give
big
it to
ones we
some-
have,
You
but
don't-
most of them are
You
under
don't have to.
the $10,000 threshold or whatever
It's
that
just
you
something
just-
I've always done.
And so we
That's fine, yeah.
We have people
have 3 or
know.
4 that we rotate through and
Yeah,
have had good luck with, and
Sure.
I think it's gonna make, the people of that way a
Yeah,
lot
I mean-
happier.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was, they need,
But that's more of a town issue with
I
that.
think it is.
That is-
I know it is.
that is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
especially
if
if
they,
that,
you know,
No,
they feel like we're trying to work with them, that's the main thing.
I'll say something not fair.
Yeah.
I'll not fair about that.
that's all I
get to
had.
meet them.
That's it.
Okay, so I entertain a motion to close,
Adjourn.
to adjourn.
I make a
Yeah,
motion
think
to
time.
adjourn.
Second.
Close the hearing too. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming, Steve.